I was just reading something, talk by the mother. It says the descent of the Supreme Mother's love that has gone down into the darkness. It is this love that shakes the inconscient, that disturbs, that prepares for change. And so something begins to happen in the resistant, inert darkness. This is the slow, gradual breaking out from utter, absolute inertia, darkness, to the beginning of a new opening, a new awareness, but just the first faint beginnings. So he uses the term a throe. A throe is a pang, a short-lived pang, usually associated with childbirth. So a new birth, a new beginning, as if the mother is shaking the unconscious mother. The supreme divine force of the love of the divine that is at the core of all things, upholding and sustaining all things, this is shaking up the dull, unconscious resistance which is ours. It is not even hostile. We are not even hostile. We are completely inert, unaware, closed. Therefore, we have to be shaken. Who is shaking? Making us suffer, making the earth break out of its sleep. It is a power of love, a supreme love. It is she who seems to tell the earth, you have to wake up, to move towards something more, a new light. How long are you going to stay in the dark? So this change it is not from unconsciousness to consciousness. It is the first need for consciousness. It's like the early morning sky. It's not totally black and the next moment it is golden and full of light. There is a transition. It's very gradual. So this is a universal phenomenon, that there is a change, very slow, often very almost unwilling, like we are not willing to change, but change has to be. It comes, we are shaken, sometimes by pain, sometimes by a new discovery, something that comes and breaks this indifference. A throe that came and left a quivering trace, just like the pang when it withdraws. The pain withdraws, it is a short-lived pain, but all the nerves are jangled. And there is a kind of inner shaking. We are not back into that state of earlier somnolence and sleep and dullness. We are not yet fully awake, but it's simply the dislike for being so dull, so heavy. Something has to go. The darkness has to go. How will it go? We don't know. Why should it go? That also we don't know. But we know that we can't continue to be the way we are. So a change that takes place in the individual consciousness, a change that takes place in the universal evolution, a change that takes place even in the physical world. The early morning breaking of dawn out of night. It's on the same, so many layers of imagery in one single line. This is always so with Sri Aurobindo. He has layers and layers and layers of significance. The more we read, the more we probe into what we read, the more our consciousness becomes more perceptive. We discover things we did not see before. It's a change within us makes us see the change around us. If we don't have eyes, we can't see light. We have just the first need for eyesight, a call for light. Then there is something from within that presses our resistance to break down. So that through A throe that came and left a quivering trace gave room for an old, tired want unfilled. Gave room, that opening took for an old want. We always have, as Sri Aurobindo has said, the earliest preoccupation of man is for God, light, freedom, immortality. We have none of them. But it is a want. Why are we preoccupied by light, by perfection, by God? Things we don't have, things we don't even understand. And yet we are dissatisfied with the opposite. When there is total darkness, when there is total untruth, when there is total blindness, there is at some point, not right away, but at some point, a dissatisfaction with the way we are. That's the beginning of the change of consciousness. Until then, we are in total inertia, total sleep, total inconscience. It is not at all an uncomfortable state because there is no feeling, there is no one who aspires. But the moment there is something that starts to shake within the being, it is the start of a new journey. How can anything within us ask for light if we are in total blindness? We don't even know what light is. Or do we? There is light somewhere inside us. There is the divine somewhere within us. There is God, freedom, immortality. All of these are within us, which is why we are asking for them. You can't ask for something totally foreign to your nature. So this is why perhaps this canto is the symbol dawn. It's a dawning from night to morning. It is a dawning from within. It is not yet the sunrise, it is before the sunrise. It's the need for the sun, the need for change. So this comes and can take a long time, but it comes because the need is there. The need is there because the truth is already there. The light is already there within us, unknown to us. So we realize how much there is within us, how little we know even of ourselves. We have to look deep within us. The simple messages that Mother gives, for instance. Look deep into your heart and you will find there the divine presence. But do we look into our heart? Or do we look into simply our vital field of emotion which we call our heart? Behind our surface vital heart, there is a deeper core of the being. The heart is the core. It is there that the presence is. So you have to keep on going within deeper and deeper. Until then, that need stays dormant. It is as if that divinity within says, this embodiment, this being doesn't need me. Man, especially the mental man, doesn't need anything more than his mind to guide him. He doesn't ask for anything more. He thinks he can solve all his problems. So the divine presence within stays quietly in the background. Unless you feel the need, you will not feel the presence at all. So until then, that old tired want, because it has been there. Again and again, it's like a cycle. Just like every day there is the end of the day and there is night. Every night ends with a dawn. It's a cyclical pattern. Man rises, man falls, man forgets, man goes back into inconscience. At some point, the unconsciousness begins to bother man. How long will I be like this? A slave to darkness, a slave to error, a slave to imperfection. Can I not come out of it? I don't know how to, but I want to. So then the change, the thirst for change, it has to start with a yearning, a wanting, a thirst. And until then, it is at peace. In the subconscious moonless cave, moon is often the symbol of the mind. So the subconscious is below the mind. The moon has no light of its own. It transmits light from a higher source. The light of the sun, the greater truth. The sun is the source of all truth. The moon transmits it. The mind transmits some light, but the mind is small. If your mind is small, you transmit a lesser light. If your mind can widen, that's one of the most important aspects of education. You widen, you heighten your faculties, you see things that were always there which you did not see before, because you recognize, you come in touch. That is a channel. The moon, the mind becomes a channel. It's a transmitting power. It's not a creative origin of light. It transmits light that comes from beyond. Now we go deep below. From the inconscient comes the subconscious. It's in the subconscious that one has the first beginnings of movement, of change, of things that relate us to life. There is a subconscious movement in the plant that, without knowing, wants to grow towards the sunlight. There is a subconscious movement in man too. Without knowing, he wants to survive. Survive for what? I don't know, but I don't want to leave the world. I want to be. I have no idea why. I have no goal. My mind has not formulated any ideas. So there is a certain quietness in the subconscious, because mind is a very agitated place, as Mother describes it as a marketplace. All kinds of thoughts crisscross all the time. In the subconscious, you can fall back into sleep, into a certain kind of peace, which is not truly a divine peace, but it is a peace without aspiration, without disturbance, where we can relate to the lower existence. There is an automatic existence. It is the subconscious that relates us to our past. And our past is the starting point of the first movement towards evolution. It is in the subconscious that you can say, I'm still the worm, I'm still a stone, which we are. We are brutes. We are not always mental beings. We are not always beings who are craving for something higher, or even craving for anything at all. We just are. I just am. I don't ask for anything. So that is why there is a certain form of tranquility. There is no aspiration. Subconscious moonless cave. At some point, this peace becomes disturbed. When the first signs of light come in, the first signs of, in the subconscious, the change starts to move towards consciousness. A consciousness where there is a response, the individual responds to something. It needs something, it asks for something. In the earlier subconscious state, there is no individual response. Here you have a response. It's not an automatic existence. So when you feel the need that I can no longer be what I was, I should no longer continue to be a pointless, meaningless being, whether I'm a worm or an animal or a man, there's not much difference except in shape. Then I realized, no, there is a lot of difference. There are possibilities. There are possibilities of change. The worm stays a worm. Man can think of changing, moving in the direction of his choice, and that is also sometimes risky because you can change back to the original darkness as well. It's very difficult to aspire all the time. That's the cyclical pattern. You aspire, you rise, you want something higher. It's very tiring to keep on aspiring. You lose that intensity, you lose that flame, you fall back. So it is, as Sri Aurobindo describes, a vertical spiral. You rise to fall. The higher you rise, the lower you fall. But that is also important because the higher you rise and then you fall there, that light comes down again into the darkness and shakes the darkness so that from below again the urge comes up. It may take centuries, or it may take 1 year, as Mother told us toward the end. It may take a few months. If you realize it's not you who are doing it, if you can relate to that force that is at work through all things, and if you can make that force move through you, it can be very rapid, the change. But if you think you are in charge of your change, it will take millennia. Because we are tied to both the world of light and the world of darkness. So it keeps on following a repetitive pattern. We go back to night, we come back to light, again and again. Man is a dual being. And so Mother's advice again and again, become one person. Don't stay a divided person. So that tired want, at some point, after the night, because it started with the absolute total night, the principles of manifestation were not evident. That is why the gods seemed to be sleeping. Now, that want felt like raising its head, to raise its head and look for absent light, a light it has lost, a light that it held very dear, but you have lost and mislaid. You don't know where you've kept it. Many of our greatest treasures are hidden. Because they are treasures, you won't put them in hiding. Then you forget where you hid them, because you are not always conscious. It's not only true for objects, it's true for yourself. Within us also are treasures. Treasures of knowledge, treasures of all the possibilities of divinity. And we have kept them very well hidden. So well hidden that we don't remember where they are now. So we have to keep on looking into ourselves, finding those elements, those treasures which are wonderful, which are perfect, which can raise us out of our imperfection and break us into a new light, into a new dawn. Because this is something that is only given to man. Only man can evolve. Only man can take charge of his evolution. No creature above man, no creature below man can change. They are what they are. Neither the gods, nor the asuras, nor the plants, nor the birds. You feed a dog well, it becomes a fine dog, but it stays a dog. But man can become much more. He can become much less. That's why it's very risky. It's a privilege and a risk. It all depends on, as Mother says, which one of the kindergarten prayers is, you're climbing up a mountain, all depends on what you put behind you. If you put the mud behind you, you look at the sky, you look at the sun. And if you put the sky and sun behind you, you only look at the dirt below. Man can move in both directions. That is why the light goes away, or seems to go away, straining closed eyes of vanished memory. Somewhere there is a need for light, because that's where we come from. And we have lost that contact. But we still dislike darkness, we still dislike suffering, we still dislike imperfection, we still dislike all the things that defeat us. Why do we dislike? Why don't we accept ourselves the way we are? Because that ability to change is there, but we have lost contact. One of the most important faculties that we need to keep always really very carefully develop it is memory. Not the mental memory, but what Sri Aurobindo describes as the soul's memory. Where do we come from? If we can keep in mind that connection. Also the mental memory, no doubt. The body has a memory. The soul has a memory. The vital has a memory. Everything has a memory. Memory is a link. It's a thread. It's a connecting thread. We don't live only this moment. We are part of a long story, a long journey. Though we have cut ourselves off from the past, we are not yet open to the future. We have reduced ourselves to this little moment which we call present. But there is no such thing as present. The present is born out of the past. And the present has already become the past before I have spoken about it. It's very short-lived. It doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. The past also is wiped off. Then are we non-existent? That is a question many sages often asked. The mystery of time. Time is very fleeting if we belong to time. Are we totally impermanent? If you go deeper, time is a portion of the eternal. It's a framework made out of the eternal. You go back from time into eternity. That is the transition of which man is capable, but it has to be a change of consciousness, not a change of his external environment. We think change is improve your environment, improve your nature, improve your habits, improve your behavior, improve your character. All this is all right up to a point, but your true self is none of these things. That essential person that you are is a projection of the divine. That's why we are. He's put himself everywhere in each being, that presence is there. But we relate to the outside appearances of things and say this is what things are. We are not. Aware that we are essentially an expression of the divine. Sometimes maybe we can feel that when there is a yearning for perfection, that perfection is the divine, that yearning for absolute light, joy, beauty, love, all the principles that are there at the origin of creation, each one relates to any one of them or all of them according to his svabhava, according to his nature. You feel, if this is what I am, then why am I relating myself to this outer being who is so full of flaws, so defective? This is not me. I don't know if you have read that marvelous essay by the mother, which Sri Aurobindo translated it. It's called The Supreme Discovery. And especially the last part. It's very beautiful. She wrote it in 1912, before she came here. But it is just the same thing that we are. We are not what we think we are. We are something more. And if we can awaken that connection, memory is a connection. If we can revert to that memory, which usually we have lost through the limited veil of the mind. Mind has a narrow frameworks. This is all I can understand. Beyond this I cannot. This much I can see, this much I can see, this is the rest I don't understand. But this much is born of a much vaster truth. No minute is born by itself. No point exists by itself. There is a force behind that creates, that sustains, that upholds. So sometimes that vanished memory, straining closed eyes of vanished memory, like one who searches for a bygone self and only meets the corpse of his desire. He wants to find that person, that being that is truly himself, that will give him a sense of an absolute fulfillment, and doesn't get it because that being he thinks is not him. Bygone is past, very, very remote past. Our past, our origin is the one, the absolute, the supreme. That's the origin of all things. That's where we come from. We have lost touch with that. If we are children of immortality, then why are we mortal? If we are Amritasya Putraha, as it is said. But we don't believe that really. We just say it as a formula. It is written in the Upanishads. You say the sages of the Upanishads have experienced it, but I don't. I feel very mortal. I've cut off connection with that. But that doesn't mean the immortality is gone. I've turned my back to it and I relate only to the surface. But sometimes I can strain towards that contact. So I search for something that I once was and I am no longer. And only meets what I am not. My desire to be perfect is not possible. It's gone. Maybe once upon a time, maybe there was a Satya Yuga, the world of perfection. All things were true and beautiful and golden. But that's a fairy tale. It doesn't exist for me. It's dead. It's gone. But still there is a sense of dissatisfaction with the way we are. It was as though even in this noughts profound, even in this ultimate dissolution's core, there lurked an unremembering entity, survivor of a slain and buried past, condemned to resume the effort and the pang, reviving in another frustrate world. This is the cycle, again and again. Even in this noughts profound, here profound I believe is a noun, profundity. It was in this profundity of nothingness. You can relate it back to the first line of the first page. Nothing seemed to be, because there was simply a state of total inconscience in which the world, the earth, man, the universe seems to have plunged. But it is from below that all growth begins, all change begins. But the change comes at the moment when, the right moment to change. The seed sprouts only when it is time for it to sprout and become a plant. But from below, how much work the soil has done, how much pressure of conscious force has been pushing the human being, living in his state of inertia, to break out. So even this, so this is a symbolic movement, whether you are plunged in sleep or plunged in indifference, whether it is the universe that is like that, the whole world around us does not look for the divine, it looks for other things which are very empty, they don't last. You want comfort or you want satisfaction or success. All these are the goals that we put before ourselves. Who puts before themselves the goal of total and absolute perfection. You don't even believe it. But when things are imperfect, you are unhappy. That means there is somewhere the need for perfection. So there is a seed that is there. Even in this core of dissolution, because it was as if nothing existed, nothing at all. It was the hour before all manifestation seemed not to exist. Something was there, an entity, which had lost contact with the origin. That is the source of all our difficulties. The source of all our difficulties is the sense of separation. And what separates us from the origin? You think you are a person. You are not one with him. That is a certain condensation of ignorance which takes the form of the ego. That's the big bad word. And the more you feel that you are someone, the more the ego bloats. And it is what is described by both Mother and Sri Aurobindo as the separatist consciousness. Because within the ego you feel that you have certain capacities, certain abilities, possibilities, you don't want anything more, you don't need the divine, you don't need anyone else to help you, you don't accept to surrender, you don't accept to open yourself until you realize that you can go thus far and no further. Why? It's a wall of the ego. It is this wall, or he calls it an insular consciousness. Insular as adjective of island. It's an island that floats from the rest of the continent. The continent is reality. It's cut off from reality. And the waters of ignorance are around me, and I think I live on my own. I am myself. I am a person. I am not. I cannot be my own origin. There is another origin. So that something is there, but it has lost connection. That something which is a survivor of a slain and buried past, which I have chosen to give up. I have turned my back. I have turned my back to the source. If I can be simple, humble, surrendered, I can say I am nothing. You take up the charge of my existence. Lead me in whichever direction you think I should move. Then that is truly bliss. But I say I can do it on my own. And at this point, at some point, this is required. The ego has to come at some point. Then you develop an individuality. The moment you develop your individuality, if you are satisfied with, once it is made, you are satisfied with having one and you feel you don't need anything more, then you stopped your advance. So it is like Mother gave us an image. You build a house, very nice and sturdy. After it's finished, you break it down, brick by brick. You realize that in this house you are secure. Now in this house you are absolutely a prisoner. So that is when the need for freedom, God, light, freedom. We are not free. We are trapped in ignorance, in smallness, in blindness, in the ego. So this pattern of rising and falling, of wanting and failing to want, condemned to resume the effort and the pang, reviving in another frustrate world. So again and again, there is frustration. You don't arrive at the final fulfillment. When something does not really fulfill itself. You make an attempt and the attempt doesn't succeed. Man attempts to grow, he attempts to change, he attempts to rise, he falls back. This is the pattern for a very long time. And the higher you climb, the lower you fall. The lower you fall, the yearning for the heights is there. At some point, this has to change. But for a long time, this is what our life is. This is what man is. Then slowly, there's the gradual change, just like it's happening in the eastern sky. The dark night, it is darkest before dawn, it is always said. There is absolutely no light. You can imagine a world where there is no artificial light, then you realize how dark things are. Then transfer that light, darkness into your mind and your nature and your being, and you say how much darkness there is. I'm made of darkness. In me there is so much that is false, so much that is dirty, so much that is ignorant. I can't live like this. Just like when you are utterly in the dark, you start yearning for some little light, some change, some movement, like the sky in the east at some point when it's the dawn begins to become not dawn, but the darkness of the eastern sky becomes less dark. It's not black anymore, it's a little grey, it's a little, he's going to develop this image, that's why I'm talking about it. There's not yet the beauty and the multiplicity of color, but there is the need for something not so dark. It's just as within us, just as the world around us also is asking for something which is not a world of conflict, not a world of ignorance, not a world of chaos. So we don't know where the answer lies. For a long time you know what you don't want, but you don't know how to get what you want. But that's a very important stage we have to go through. That's why we are condemned, it's like a punishment. An unshaped consciousness desired light, and a blank prescience yearned towards distant change. Prescience is something you know, not very clearly, not very absolute, meticulously, but something that says, I know. When I am totally ignorant and I'm asking for light or knowledge, I have to know that I am ignorant. And I have somewhere a feeling that this is not something that has to last. I can come out of it. Man is a transitional being. He is not a completely finished product. If you are a transitional being, you know that you are a being of change. But it is not clearly formulated in which direction is my change. How should I transform myself? What is my best path? Nothing of all this is known. But this one thing is sure, that I have to change. I cannot be like this. Ignorance is something that sort of nudges, pushes the individual to come out of it. For a long time he doesn't know how, but he knows he must. So that is why it's a blank prescience. Nothing is clearly understood. It's not formulated, but it's a need. You just know that there is something which is the opposite of darkness, which you call light. It's a word you have not experienced. Like joy, perfect joy, a word which is the opposite of the pain in which we constantly fall back in. Of immortality which you don't know at all, but you dislike death. Nobody likes death, nobody likes to die. Nobody knows the secret of immortality. So it's this in-between stage from not accepting and not liking the way we are and not able to move into what we want to be because we are not sure what we want to be. But it's very important. So we can perhaps think that darkness, ignorance, error, they are like catalysts for change. Unless they were there, we wouldn't want to change. And how can this darkness become a catalyst? It is because it's the divine. The divine that is entered into the darkness, hidden himself in the absolute bottom of all things. It is this night, this darkness, that if you have read that beautiful sonnet of Sri Aurobindo, The Pilgrim of the Night, the seeker of truth goes down into darkness, and he calls this going down a pilgrimage. He's going into the divine hidden in the darkness. There seems, he says, there comes no voice of the celestial friend. There is no guidance. And yet I know my footsteps track shall be a pathway towards immortality. Deep in the heart of darkness, there is the immortal. Which is perhaps one reason why, as Mother says, here everything is taken up. All the aspects and all the activities of mind, life, body, the vital, everything is taken up. The possibility of error and failure, therefore, is much more complex, much more varied. You're not following one track, moving in many directions at the same time, or not moving at all, if that is your choice. But it's part of the divine plan. Should we stop? Yes? It's a bit heavy.
It's lovely.
Because the next sentence is quite complex.